Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Livestream. I hope you're all very well this evening. I hope you enjoyed the Sunday brunch with Phil and Michael Lambert. That was really interesting. I hope you'll be able to see the next one. We have some more guests lined up. So I hope everyone is very well. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Enzo the God. Great to see you, Enzo. Gene T. Great to see you. Raven 1983 Witch. Great to have you on. Dr. T. Great to see you. Katrina Bryce. Great to have you on. Hope you're well. Audrey, great to see you. Hope you're well, Audrey. Tiny Demolition Lover, hope you're well up there in Scotland. We have Katie, great to see you, Katie. Asperger, great to see you. Mark, great to have you on. Killer, great to have you on. Hope you're well. The Freckled Pony, great to see you. We also have Conservator, great to have you on. Lenan, great to have you on too. Ak is Mad, great to see you. Hi Max, hi all. Busy tonight. Got Cali Thistle versus Aberos on tablet. Villa versus Liverpool on TV. Waiting for the stream to start. Wow, you're doing a bit of multitasking there. W&G fan. Anyone heard of Elon Musk? Yeah, I actually have a video dropping tomorrow about Elon Musk. We have Adam Lee. Great to see you, Adam. Hope you're well. Roseanne, great to see you. Fearless Wolf, hope you're well tonight. Magic, great to see you. And there's so many more. Well, we're up to 225. Hope everyone's well. Thanks for coming on. Remember to smash the like button. And we have Valerio. Thank you so much, Valerio. Hi, Max. Starmer should hire Phil as his advisor. Yes. So on Sunday, a lot of people were very, very positive feedback from all of you following the Sunday brunch. Phil is very popular. We hope to have Phil back once again. A lot of comments were Phil for Prime Minister, and I don't think Phil would like to do the job, but I don't know. We should encourage him. We should, we should bombard him with messages to run for public office, because I think the Labour Party definitely could do with somebody like Phil on their side. But he said he's maybe a bit too aggressive for them. Thanks so much, Valerio. So definitely he should join them. They should reach out to him. The Labour Party really need to do something about their social media platform. I was reading, I think it was today or yesterday, I saw the Labour Party in Scotland. The leader of the Labour Party held a live stream. Do you know how many people were on the live stream? Anyone, do you want to make a guess? Post in the chat how many people you thought were on the live stream for the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. We'll wait for that to pop up and then we'll move on. So did the Tories win? How about the Queen's speech? 6, 2, 8, 3. Stephen is correct. There were 3. 3, yes, not 300. 3. 40, no, 3. There were 3 people. I don't know at what stage that was, whether it was at the beginning or the end, but the image I saw was 3. Not 33, not pi. Buxton says pi. Yeah, it was quite close there. So 3 people. We had, when on the Sunday brunch with Phil, we had 1,700 or almost 1,800 people on, and Phil gets about the same number when he does his live stream. So yeah, 3 for the Labour Party in Scotland. Okay, this is what we're talking about. I know maybe some people on the stream tonight are not too happy about supporting the Labour Party, particularly in Scotland, but just to point out that they don't have a real they don't have a social media platform at all. Anyway, hope everyone's well. So let's jump into, I want to start off with beergate. Magic, thanks so much for that super chat. Labour Twitter hasn't posted since the 25th of May 2011. My God. Are you sure that's true? But I don't think you're lying, but 2011. That's insane. I know Keir Starmer posts every day, but that's his own account. But the Labour Party need to have a proper account. Is that Labour Scotland or Labour UK? So it says here, beergate, Labour MPs wary of internal manoeuvring after Starmer pledge. So Keir Starmer has said that if he receives a fixed penalty notice, he will resign. Thanks, Magic, for that super chat. If he receives fixed penalty notice, he will resign, which has put the Tory-backed media in a bit of a flurry because they were expecting him to Sir Beer Karma. That's lovely, Alan. Von Nickenizer. Hi, hope you're well. So it says here, Labour MPs have expressed private frustration that Keir Starmer's pledge to resign if he's fined by Durham Constabulary for the Beergate investigation will lead to leadership jostling among ambitious shadow ministers. I don't think he's going to be fined. That would be highly unusual. I imagine he's already been in contact with the police and they said, no, we're not going to fine you. So I think this is a bit of a political game he's playing. But if he were to be fined and he did resign, what would that mean? It would mean somebody, they would be jostling for his position and who could take over. I think some interesting figures would be lining up. Regan Ali, thanks so much for that super chat. The only beergate taking place was Boris drinking with his mates while people die alone. Yes. It's important to remember that Keir Starmer attended an event before a by-election. So he was doing a work activity and they organised some food for the people who were preparing for the campaign. Boris Johnson was having parties. Boris Johnson was organising and his team were organising drinks, after work. They were going from the workplace to the garden or even inside and having literal parties were taking place. Well said, Reagan Elite. It's a completely different situation. Sir Beer Karma, front page of the Mail tomorrow. It says here, sources, both Starmer and his deputy Angela Rayner were at the event at Durham Miners Hall, where a takeaway curry for the MPs and their aides is now subject to an investigation into whether it was a social event banned under COVID-19 rules in place in April last year. Starmer said no rules were broken and the staff ate while working on an election campaign. Sources said Starmer told aides he wanted to announce that he was prepared to resign 3 days before they agreed with his judgment. After days of anguish in his top team led to frustrated Labour leader to seek outside counsel from former advisors. The majority of shadow ministers said that they were grimly resigned to Starmer's pledge, but said that there were likely to be internal consequences. I think once you start taking up the prospect of your own resignation, you are on dangerous ground, one said. Another veteran MP, Starmer loyalist, said they suspected ulterior motives from some shadow cabinet members. If you fancy Kerr's job, this is a win-win, they said. I think this is a bit of a storm in a teacup here. I don't think he's going to resign. It's possible that he will receive a fixed penalty notice, and then he will resign. That's possible, but I don't think he's going to receive a fixed penalty notice. Because he wouldn't put himself in that position. It's also possible that he doesn't know whether he would receive one or not, and he's playing. He's taking a huge risk here. Politicians don't normally do that. So, if he didn't know he was going to get one, his best solution would have been just to keep quiet about it and let it go, because something else will come along and distract the public. So I think he knows he's not going to get one. He's probably spoken to lawyers or whatever, and they said, no, you're probably okay. And that's probably why he has contacts in the police who would probably confirmed that he's going to be okay. And that's why he went ahead and said, yeah, if I receive a fixed penalty notice, I'll resign. Because he knows that Boris Johnson is not going to do the same. So there's no real... there's a sort of political advantage in doing this, but only if you're going to remain. Because if he resigns and Boris Johnson doesn't resign, then he's gained nothing. He's lost everything and gained nothing. If he believed he'd be forced to resign, and that would bring Boris Johnson down as well, that would be some sort of benefit. But he obviously knows that wouldn't be the case. So I think, as far as I believe, he's not going to receive a fixed penalty notice, and he's not going to have to resign. So he's not actually really at risk here. He was member. Yeah, he was the DPP, so he's an expert on the subject. The Fall is now suggested his pledge to resign if charged is putting pressure on the police. Nothing will satisfy the heart. Exactly, and I mentioned this in the video today, how there's nothing he could do that would satisfy the right-wing media. Nothing. If he stayed, they would say, why isn't he offering to resign? Now he's offering to resign. If he's found guilty, then they're criticizing him as well. There's nothing he could do. And this is what I said before. People seem to think that, people were talking about Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn was smeared by the right-wing media back in 2019. Every Labour leader is smeared by the right-wing media. So it doesn't matter who you are. As long as you're a member of the Labour Party, you're going to get smeared. So you have to try and use it to your advantage. And I think this is what Starmer is doing here. He's like, oh, okay, right-wing media, you want me to resign? Okay, I'll offer to resign. What is their response to that? Oh, you're putting pressure on the police. Well, that doesn't actually work with many people. It shows them as desperate. So this is a real victory for him. He called their bluff. The whole thing is a sham, a distraction, and unworthy of such extensive attention. Yes, and unfortunately, this is what the right-wing media's modus operandi is just to focus on protecting. Their whole goal is protecting Boris Johnson and the Tories. And I don't want to focus on this tonight because it's not really important. I just want to read this tweet. It says here, after Prime Minister hints at measures on cost of living in the chamber, the Treasury source says they have no idea what he's referring to, as they're not aware of anything specific on the way. So Boris Johnson today, during the response to the Queen's speech, said that he's going to, over the next number of days, he's going to release some new measures to deal with the cost of living. And the Treasury says, what? What are you talking about? We know nothing about this. So once again, you have Boris Johnson going rogue here. The Queen's speech was supposed to include measures to deal with the cost of living crisis, and it contained nothing. It's more about keeping the right-wing bigots happy, but there's nothing really in the cost of living to deal with the cost of living crisis in the. But I'll get back to that later. One of the big issues this week, of course, was what happened in Northern Ireland. So we had the vote come in, and Labour picked up seats in Scotland, replaced the Tories, and we covered that at the last live stream. But in Northern Ireland, something very big has happened. Sinn Féin has become the largest party. The DUP have refused to go into government with them, to form the executive. And this is what Joe Brawley, who's you could say an expert on Northern Ireland, said about the whole situation and what this means for the future.
Don't say this in any sectarian way. The North was set up a century ago as a unionist Reich, a Reich that would last forever. I mean, whenever they were drawing the boundary, the only surprise was that they kept Tyrone. It would have saved them a lot of trouble if they had let Tyrone go. There was never meant to be proper power sharing. I mean, the DUP, for example, didn't even sign up to the Good Friday Agreement, the peace agreement. Ian Paisley then came on board in 2007. He was guaranteed that he would be top dog. And so this psychological idea of eternal dominance, and then, the DUP essentially doing their politicking in Westminster, where they didn't have very much to do, that has all changed all of a sudden. And the question now is, well, what do they do? What do they do? The time has come now, and there's going to be a lot of pain for them. But there's only one way that things can go, and that's towards progressive power sharing.
So I think he brought up some very interesting things here about the DUP. So the DUP obviously were against the Good Friday Agreement when it first came into being, and they only switched over to supporting it, obviously for power reasons, because Ian Paisley Sr. at the time realized, wow, if it's going to be the biggest party who are in charge in the executive, and the DUP are the biggest party, then we're going to take advantage of that. And they believed it would go on forever. And they didn't realize that parties like the Alliance Party or Sinn Féin itself would actually become big enough to replace them. Wow, 493 eyes, 166 likes. Smash that like button. Thanks so much, Conservator. And the DUP, obviously, not the smartest party in Northern Ireland. And I've said this before, their hatred of Ireland and their hatred of the European Union is stronger than any love for the Union. And that's why they supported Brexit. In the end, they hoped to gain two things from Brexit. One was that there would be a hard border on the island of Ireland, because Brexiteers in Britain probably convinced them, yeah, that's what we'll do. Now, I'm not talking about Boris Johnson, I'm talking about maybe members of the ERG. They're allies in Westminster. And they said, look, if people vote to leave, there's going to be a border somewhere. We're going to make sure that the border is in the island of Ireland. And the DUP didn't understand the consequences of that. And the Brexiteers in Great Britain didn't understand the consequence of that. And they bet the farm on a border on the island of Ireland. And they lost. And I think also another aspect of this is their hatred of the European Union. They see it as something progressive. They see it as something that multicultural. They see it as progressive politics. Allowing women, for example, access to abortion is something that the DUP are completely against. And they see that, well, things are changing in the Republic of Ireland. We don't want to be part of that. It's not just we want to be part of the Union, we don't want to be part of Ireland, because Ireland is no longer a papist state. It's probably worse for them because they probably prefer a papist state than a progressive, open society. The DUP are a party of 1690, political dinosaurs and cultural dinosaurs. And they still believe that they can hold on to that past. And in my interview with Kevin Maher about this, and he raised a very valid point that the DUP and the unionists have lost on everything. They lost on the Anglo-Irish Agreement. They lost when it came to policing. They lost when it came to parades. They lost when it came to the Irish language. They lost on everything. And they have never won any of these political battles. They lost when it came to the Good Friday Agreement. They lost on a whole range of things. And their world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you look at the parades, for example, back in 1985, the protests against the Anglo-Irish Agreement brought out 1 million people. Maybe it wasn't 1 million, it was about 100,000 people marched against the Anglo-Irish Agreement between Gareth Fitzgerald and Margaret Thatcher. And Ian Paisley led the march, Ian Paisley Sr. Those days are gone. If you look at the marches against the protocol, it's about 100 people in an orange lodge, hosted by Ben Habib, an ex-politician. Kate Hoey, a reject staying in the House of Lords at the moment. These are the leaders of this great movement against the protocol, and they took it to court and they lost. They took it to court again and they lost. They're marching every week or every month, and it comes to nothing. And they still think that they are in charge, or they still think that they are politically relevant. Robot Monkey, thank you so much for that super chat. I love the doggy. So when it comes to sticking with Brexit, of course, and then I want to read out some of your comments. It says here, Labour says abandoning Northern Ireland Protocol would trigger trade war with EU. Labour says abandoning parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol would start a trade war with Europe. Labour's Brexit spokesperson Jenny Chapman has said. The government's threat to tear up the protocol risks a trade war during a cost of living crisis. Instead of negotiating practical fixes that would benefit businesses and communities, the government plans to break the agreement that they themselves negotiated and sold to the British public. Tensions are high in Northern Ireland, while families across the country face rising prices and higher bills. This is a consequence. There is no consensus to scrap the protocol in Cabinet, let alone in Northern Ireland. The last thing the country needs is more instability and a damaging trade dispute with our nearest trading partners. And it's correct. The last thing the UK government needs is a trade war with the European Union during a cost of living crisis, when Jacob Rees-Mogg is saying we need to leave the borders open because we can't afford to actually carry out checks. And I've said this before. Can you imagine, in a trade war, the European Union the European Commission, I should say, bring out a new regulation to punish Britain, saying something like, ports need to upgrade their toilets, for example. So we'll have to close the port of Calais for about 2 weeks in order to upgrade these toilets. This is a stupid example, but you probably get the idea of what I'm talking about here. Can you imagine the port of Calais closed for 2 weeks? No goods moving in and out of Calais. It would damage Britain unbelievably. Because obviously the UK government are not carrying out checks because they can't afford to carry out checks, because it would slow down trade and it would drive up prices during a cost of living crisis. So you don't want to go into a trade war with the European Union, and I don't think that's what's going to happen. This is all, once again, bluster from Brexiteers. We've seen it before. This has been going on since Lord Frost was appointed Brexit minister. And do you remember? Every week, we're going to trigger Article 16. The protocol's not working. The conditions have been met to trigger Article 16. And they went on and on throughout last summer, saying we're going to trigger it, we're going to trigger it. Then into the winter, we're going to trigger it. Lord Frost left because of COVID. Yeah, right? Because of COVID restrictions. Nothing to do with Brexit, of course. And then Liz Truss took over, and the first thing she said, we're ready to trigger Article 16. And she took over in, was it December? January? I don't even remember at this stage. Months ago. And now they're saying, yes, this week we're ready to tear up the withdrawal agreement, or the protocol. Fearless Wolf, thanks so much for that super chat. They lost when the Tories passed the gay marriage and when Westminster was running Northern Ireland. Oh, the irony. Yes. and I've mentioned, thanks for that super chat. And I've mentioned this before, the DUP are a party of not just of the past, but of ancient past. And a good way to convince them to come back into power sharing would be say, okay, well, if we take power back, what we'll do is we'll push through some legislation that the DUP would not like gay marriage or abortion or human rights, basically. Things like this, that the DUP, the backward bigots that they are, they have to keep their supporters happy. And if they're seen as not defending, the family or whatever the rhetoric is, they'll come marching back in because they don't want to lose support. They're political cynics at the end of the day. I don't think they really care about these issues, but they understand that their supporters do. Like the Republican Party in the United States, they don't care about abortion. They don't care about gun rights. They care about, they know that their supporters do, and they will egg those people on, and they will convince them that, yes, you need to vote for me because I care about these things. If you don't believe me, look at how many Republican politicians had their mistresses had abortions, for example, while at the same time they will be campaigning against support for example, Planned Parenthood or other organizations that provide family planning services or information. Liz Truss is keeping quiet, yes. Nobody wants to touch this hot potato. The Tomaleg, thanks so much for that super chat. Their only strategy into going into the assembly was to destroy from within. They hated the Good Friday Agreement and freedom movement. I don't even think it's so much the Good Friday Agreement, but it's what it was there to protect, and that's against a border on the island of Ireland. So they eventually want to put a border on the island of Ireland, and to hell with the consequences, because then they remain relevant. Because the worst thing for the DUP would be a united Ireland, not because of the fact of a united Ireland, but because they would become irrelevant. In the same sense, like, why would somebody vote for the DUP if a united Ireland was around the corner? If you know that it's coming, they would be irrelevant in a united Ireland. There is no unionism anymore, in the sense that political unionism, I should say. There are people who would prefer to be part of the United Kingdom, and some of them live in Ireland as well, in the Republic. But as a political force, they don't exist. And there's no, a united Ireland is a one-way street, especially with EU membership, and the fact that the UK, or Wangland, or whatever it will be in a few years' time, that is outside the European Union. So there's no real benefit of rejoining the United Kingdom. There are some people online who talk about rejoining the United Kingdom, that the Republic of Ireland should give up its republic status and rejoin the United Kingdom. These people are, beyond the pale completely. I actually was interested in actually having a discussion with one of them, but he refused to have a chat with me. I've said to him, my door is always open if you want to come back, but I don't think he will. I don't think he was too happy about what I had to say about the likes of the DUP. Johnny the Silverback Dragon, thank you so much, and what a wonderful name. Thanks so much for that super chat, Max. The DUP can't be the party of the ancient past. The world is only 6,000 years old. So that's a reference to Edwin Poots, the former leader, who believes that the earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Yes. And these are the people who are making decisions, healthcare decisions for the public, funding for scientific projects. And I think he believes it. He truly believes it. He's not just pretending in order to keep some wackos on board. I think Edwin Poots actually believes that. I would love to be a journalist to ask him about dinosaurs. That'd be an interesting question. What's your take on dinosaurs? Is it the devil put them there to test people's faith? There's European unionism now. Very well said, Nick. Anyway, let's move on with some more Brexit stuff and protocol stuff. Staying with the Guardian. No, sorry. It says here, European Union's Šefčovič says renegotiation of Northern Ireland Protocol is not an option. This is not really news. We've heard this before. European Commission Vice President Maroš Šefčovič said on Tuesday that renegotiating of the protocol on Northern Ireland in the Brexit withdrawal agreement is not an option following the traditional Queen's speech in London. The EU has been open to joint work with the UK on implementing the protocol to bring long-term legal certainty and predictability to the people and businesses in Northern Ireland, Šefčovič said in a statement. The EU remains open on such discussions. Only joint solutions will work. Unilateral action by the UK would only make our work on possible solutions more difficult, he said. The protocol, as a cornerstone of the withdrawal agreement, is an international agreement. Its recognition is not an option. The European Union is united in this position. We've heard this before, and the European Union's position has not changed. And I've said before how, the European Union have not criticised the protocol. Who is criticising the protocol? Brandon Lewis, Boris Johnson, Lord Frost, Liz Truss. These are the people criticising the protocol. And I wish I was a journalist, because I would ask them, what is the problem? Give us an example of how the protocol is not working. Not something high level, a specific example. And then I see if we can fix that. Present that to the European Union. Okay, this is a problem. Can we fix it? But it requires both sides coming together and trying to find a solution. But if your entire political motivation is just to pretend that there are problems that can't be resolved without removing the protocol, then of course you're not going to provide examples. You're going to just say it's not working. It's not been implemented correctly. It undermines the Good Friday Agreement. Something that was designed and both sides agreed to it. Remember, it's not the EU imposing this. The UK government agreed to it. Then how can you turn around and say, yeah, it's undermining the Good Friday Agreement? In what way? The media not even asking what it is. This is really frustrating for me, because when I listen to these interviews, you have a politician who says the protocol is not working, and the most you get from the journalist is, yes, but you signed it. Like Dominic Raab on Sunday. Dominic Raab was challenged somewhat on that, and his response was, yeah, whatever, but it's not working. But that's really, I would give my right arm if I could get one of these journalists to ask that specific question. Give us an example of how, from Dominic Raab or Liz Truss or whoever, give us a specific example of how the protocol is not working. Because about a year ago, Lord Frost was at the, there's a think tank, I don't remember the name now, Policy Institute or Policy Exchange, I think, Policy Exchange. And they sent out invitations, and I got one of these invitations, and I applied to, and I sat through 2 hours of this thing, waiting for the opportunity to ask a question, and I didn't get to ask a question. But the question I wanted to ask was, I wanted to ask Lord Frost, what is a specific example of the protocol not working? I also wanted to ask him why, at the time, last June I think it was, why his government had not implemented parts of the agreement that he was supposed to implement. For example, there were meant to be permanent structures in place. At the time, they were only temporary. So I want to ask him, why was that not moving ahead? No, keep your eye on it's not worth it. What is not working? Yes, what is not working? Artemis, great to see you on the stream. Hope you're well. Unionism is a form of propaganda control to stir up hatred or hate. Brexiteers have to watch their rhetoric. There's a war. There's a war in Europe. They need to be seen to be acting in good faith and not breaking agreements. Article 16 isn't even what most people think it is. It's just a trigger for discussions. Exactly. Article 16 is about protecting the protocol. It's not about suspending the protocol. It's a measure to bring both sides, to restart the joint committee where both sides come together and try to fix that specific problem. That's what Article 16 is about. It's about suspending part of the protocol so the rest of the protocol can continue. It's not about suspending the entire protocol. And that's what frustrates me as well when you hear politicians say, yeah, we're going to trigger Article 16, As I said, it's not like a big red button that somebody presses and it causes an explosion somewhere else. Well, the DUP's dream is to have a hard border would certainly upset the Good Friday Agreement. And that's the important point to take from this, is that the Good Friday Agreement is about reducing the elimination of security infrastructure on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. That's what it's about. That's a core part of the Good Friday Agreement. So if you have a hard border on the island of Ireland, you'll need infrastructure there. If that infrastructure becomes a target, because it will be seen as undermining the Good Friday Agreement, the people who, we have to remember that one of the consequences of the peace process was to have the Good Friday Agreement. The IRA were convinced, look, if you stop your war, we're going to create a scenario where there is no requirement for having the British Army here. So if you give up your weapons, we can put in place a situation where there is no requirement for the British Army. There are no security checks on the border. So that's a consequence of the peace process. If the DUP say, well, to hell with that, we're going to put a border on the island of Ireland, then you're going to encourage attacks on that border, and then you're going to need a security presence. And that's in breach of the Good Friday. That's going against the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. Not even the spirit, it goes against the word of the Good Friday Agreement. But the people who would be encouraging this were people who never supported the Good Friday Agreement in the first place. The majority of the DUP and the likes of the TUV and loyalist paramilitaries and loyalist organisations who were never supportive of the Good Friday Agreement. Anyway, let's... So the Irish Taoiseach had something to say about this as well. He said, the Irish Prime Minister urges Johnson to avoid unilateral action over Northern Ireland Protocol amid reports ministers might start ditching it next week. Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, Irish Prime Minister, has used a call with Boris Johnson this morning to urge him not to take unilateral action over Northern Ireland Protocol. So Martin said, I spoke to Prime Minister Boris Johnson this morning. We both agreed on the need to see the Northern Ireland Executive formed as as soon as possible. On the protocol, I stressed need to intensify UK and EU and UK discussions and avoid any unilateral action. Well, I can imagine what these discussions are going like. Yeah, please don't undermine the protocol. And Boris Johnson, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And then put down the phone. Yeah, we're going to undermine the protocol. It must be extremely frustrating dealing with somebody like Boris Johnson, because you will ask them to say yes to something and then the next day they will say no to it. According to a report in the Times this morning, the government is poised to announce that it will take unilateral action over the protocol with legislation that would abolish parts of it. The Foreign Secretary has concluded that there is little point trying to reach a Brexit deal with the European Union and will move as soon as next week to scrap large parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol in British law. Officials working for Liz Truss have drawn up draft legislation that would unilaterally remove the need for all checks on goods being sent from Britain for use in Northern Ireland. This would allow businesses in the province to disregard EU rules and regulations and take away the power of the European Court of Justice to rule on issues related to Northern Ireland. The paper said an announcement will come next Tuesday. I don't believe this is true, because it would create instability in Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland needs stability, and businesses in Northern Ireland would prefer to have stability. And also another problem with this is that, and I think, and I don't know if this is true or not, so this is me speculating, I think this is another attempt to keep it to yourself, okay, but to throw the DUP under the bus again. Because if the UK government say to the DUP, okay, you go into power sharing with Sinn Féin, what we'll do is we'll dismantle part of the protocol. And the DUP will go, okay, we'll go into power with Sinn Féin, and then the government will, the UK government will do nothing, basically. They did this before. They said, yeah, we'll suspend the protocol, we'll throw, we'll trigger Article 16, and they didn't. And the DUP went along with them. Because the DUP are in a difficult position as well. The DUP can continue to say, yeah, we're not going to go into power sharing with Sinn Féin because we want the protocol fixed. And I said I think it was at the last live stream, I said, well, what the UK government could do is say to the DUP, yeah, we're going to fix it, or we have fixed it. If the UK government said that, then the DUP would be in a bit of a difficult spot, because then they would have to say, oh, okay, then we'll go into power sharing with Sinn Féin because you have fixed it. But what does fixing it mean? We're getting back to the Brexit problem. Rushing, thanks so much for that super chat. Sorry, I almost missed it. Thank you very much for that. You get back to the Brexit problem where, some time ago I was saying, what does Brexit actually mean? What did people actually vote for? If I said, go out and get me a pizza, and I don't tell you what type of pizza, I don't tell you if I want it cold or frozen, or hot or cooked or whatever, if I want pineapple on the pizza, if I want a picture of a pizza, if all I say is I want a pizza, then whatever you come back with would be sufficient, no? Or not sufficient, as the case may be. And I think this is what the UK government could be doing with the DUP. They say, yeah, we're going to suspend we're going to suspend part of the protocol, and the DUP would have to go along with that. Because if they don't, then they would have been, defeating their own entire argument of not going into power with Sinn Féin. It would get the DUP also out of a spot, because the DUP have said, well, we're not going to go into power with Sinn Féin unless the protocol is fixed. Well, if they can sell to their supporters, yes, we've got the UK government over a barrel, we got them to fix the protocol, now we're going into power sharing. Because they want power at the same time, but they want to appear like they are the ones in control. So they'll try and sell it to their... is the pizza oven ready, Max? It depends. So maybe I'm reading too much into this, I don't know. But I think if the DUP have a possibility of taking advantage of this situation by selling to their supporters, yes, we have got the UK government over a barrel. The UK government has had the EU over a barrel, and the UK government extracted concessions from the EU to suspend part of the protocol. Now, we don't know what parts of the protocol are the problem, because nobody's actually presented a real problem. So whatever the UK government responds with would potentially be okay, because we don't know what is the requirement. Do you understand how this doesn't make any sense? And anything and nothing, and anything above nothing should be sufficient. And there's also another dynamic here, is that the reason Sinn Féin and the Alliance Party did so well is because they talked about the cost of living crisis. They didn't talk about the union, they didn't talk about the protocol, but they talked about the cost of living crisis. And if the DUP are seen not going into power with Sinn Féin during a cost of living crisis, I think that's going to damage them politically. So if I was in the DUP, what my strategy would be this: put pressure on the UK government, agree, look, just come back with something, even if it's fake, okay, so that we can sell it to our supporters. We can go into power with Sinn Féin, and we'll go in saying, yes, we got these conditions, we got these guarantees from the UK government that they're fixing the protocol, and we're going to go into power with Sinn Féin. We would say we're going to go into the executive to fix the cost of living crisis. Aren't we wonderful? That's the way I would if I was in the DUP, that's what I would do. Because staying out doesn't help. It's actually going to damage you. Because in 6 months' time, when the other parties say, well, which do you want? A party that actually does the job, or do you want a party that just complains? I think it's going to... It would not help the DUP. The Tom Lake, thanks so much for that super chat. talking to Boris would be like talking to Churchill, the nodding dog. Oh, yes. From the ad. Thanks so much for that super chat. Yes. Steady now. Johnson doesn't care about the DUP, he doesn't care about the protocol, he doesn't care about Northern Ireland, he doesn't care about Britain, he doesn't care about anything that doesn't include the name Boris Johnson. So you're not expecting Boris Johnson to do something here. But I think selling people the idea that we got one over on the EU, and I've said before that the EU is willing to say anything if it gets over they're willing to look as if they compromised if it gives the UK government some sort of political room to maneuver. It was the same before. The EU's response to Boris Johnson, to Theresa May, was always respectful, even though that the language coming from Britain was quite toxic. But the EU understood, okay, if we want the UK to do X, they have to be in a position to do X. So if it requires us to look humble, then we'll do that. But the consequence is positive. This is how the EU work. If they want you to do something, they will look as if they are bending over backwards in order to get you to do it. But you're the one who's actually doing the activity, doing the action at the end of the day. And I think this is what's going to transpire. Is what's going to happen is the UK government will say, yes, well, we forced the EU to compromise on this, that, and the other. The EU will come back and say, yes, we're going to streamline the protocol in this way or that way. We're going to remove these aspects. Yes, we've compromised. The UK government can sell that to the DUP, and then the DUP can sell it to their supporters, and then they will go into. That's, I think, the best case scenario. Now, of course, the worst case scenario would be the DUP say, the UK government try to suspend part of the protocol. I don't know how they do that, because that would be breaking international law. I don't think that's going to happen, but the worst case scenario would be they would attempt to suspend checks, for example, or declarations. I don't know if that's possible, but they could try and do something like that. But you have to think always of the Tory government's point of view. How does this benefit the Tory government? How does suspending the Northern Ireland Protocol benefit the Tory government? It doesn't. It causes problems later on. So there's no real advantage in doing this. Who benefits from suspending part of the protocol? The DUP, not the Tory party. It'll just create headache, rebellions within the Conservative Party. It'll keep some Brexiteers happy, but you can't keep Brexiteers happy. That's the problem. What is Jerry Adams up to these days? So your comment got if you write in capital letters, your comments get deleted. So just keep it in lowercase. Sorry, I got on these rants when it comes to Northern Ireland, but anyway, Boris Johnson, of course, has responded to this by saying, we're not going to undermine the Good Friday Agreement, but we will protect the Good Friday Agreement, but not the protocol. Theresa May, can we bring her back? She was a terrible individual, a terrible prime minister, but the bar has been set so low recently. Theresa May could easily hop over it. Theresa May says it would be a mistake for government to legislate to ditch parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. On Northern Ireland, May said that there was no reference in the Queen's speech to a Northern Ireland Protocol bill. She said a bill of the kind the government is said to be considering, giving it the power to ditch part of the protocol would not be a good idea. She goes on, I think the government needs to consider not just the immediate issues, but also the wider sense of what such a move would say about the UK government and its willingness to abide by treaties it has signed. The DUP Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says the Northern Ireland Protocol has to be dealt with. May says she put forward a Brexit plan. This was wonderful. She put forward a Brexit plan that would have avoided new checks as the Northern Ireland Great Britain border, but the DUP opposed the plan, she says. She also says that she's disappointed that no employment bill in the Queen's speech. And then, okay. The dancing Queen, yes. So if you remember, Theresa May had put forward, there was the idea of the backstop, and that was rejected by Boris Johnson and the DUP. This would have kept the UK as a whole within the single market and the customs union until a solution could be found. And of course, this could be something that would be kicked into the long grass, and the UK would have remained within the single market and the customs union indefinitely. And one of the reasons the Brexiteers didn't like it was because they actually had no solution. So they didn't want the backstop, but they had no alternative to it. So that's what brought down Theresa May's government eventually. Because you had these yahoos in the ERG who were saying, oh no, we don't want this. And then they were asked, well, what is your solution to that? And they had electronic borders. We can scan trucks. Yeah, that's the solution. But that's a border on the island. Yeah, but it's not a border on the island because it's an electronic one. Don't worry, there's something arriving. Technology, yes. Jacob Rees-Mogg, not the first person you think of to sell some type of new pie-in-the-sky technology. Where in Ireland are you originally from? You asks Max. I've needed to ask for a while. I won't insult in saying Republic or Northern. Of Northern. I've always considered it as one since I'm a rugby fan, Max. Yes, I'm from Longford, but I lived in Dublin for a while, but now I live in Italy. So originally from Longford. I don't know if I still have the accent. Some people say I do. I don't know if I still have it. Probably hidden around somewhere in some of the words that come out. The backstop was only the customs union. It was the customs union, not the single market. Apologies, yes. Correct. Cashed on me. It's so long ago. Was it 3 years ago? Wow. Time flies. I want to show you, sorry to inflict these two individuals upon you, but this was quite funny.
What an absolute horlicks, isn't it? It is a horlicks. You've got the DUP, you're the dominant party these days in unionist politics. We've also, of course, got the Ulster Unionist Party. And then we've got the TUV. And Jim Allister, who is a charismatic, I served in the European Parliament with him, a charismatic figure.
Jim Allister, a charismatic figure? Really? Doesn't come across as very charismatic to me. It sounds like an angry old man. No offence to old people, but Jim Allister is an angry person. He's not charismatic.
He gets 7.6% of the vote in Northern Ireland and one seat. If you lot can't sort this out, you may well be kissing goodbye to your place in the United Kingdom.
Yes, look, I think this has to be the single largest blowing of the whistle or wake-up call to unionists. We cannot afford to constantly keep going off on ego trips, having our own parties, having our own splits, and saying it'll be all right, we'll keep transferring within the unionist family, because it doesn't happen. The vote gets diluted, and we salami slice the same number of votes and don't increase or grow the unionist voting base, and that is a huge problem.
Now, what he's trying to advocate for here is, well, we should just have the DUP. And the problem with that is that the DUP are too extreme. That's why you have people voting for the UUP. That's why you have people voting for the Alliance Party. Because they're not happy with the DUP. Not everyone in the unionist community is somebody who believes that the Earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Not everyone in the unionist community believes that, and this is what he's attempting to do here. He's trying to create a one issue party here. But what's different with the SNP in Scotland? Yes, the SNP are a focus. They're mainly a one-party issue, independence. But they're also open in a progressive way, where they have policies that help ordinary people. The DUP are not interested in helping ordinary people. They're focused only on everything negative. The party of no, not the party of let's do something for the people of Northern Ireland. And the SNP are not sectarian. This is a problem with the DUP as well. They're a sectarian party. They align themselves with the Orange Order, for example. Not the most progressive people. So you're representing a niche in Northern Ireland. Because if you truly cared about the union, then you would be open to welcoming more people in. You'll be more progressive. Because Northern Ireland is progressive. The people of Northern Ireland are not bigots. The DUP are bigots. So they represent a smaller and smaller section of society in Northern Ireland. Most people in Northern Ireland care about, paying bills or sending their kids to a good school, a safe school. They care about paying the bills, having a good job, things like this. They're not interested in this sort of fringe politics. And the DUP seem to think, well, anyone who represents something that's not us is splitting the vote. the People's Judea Front, was it the Judean People's Front or the People's Front of Judea? Italy, north or southern Italy, in northern Italy, northeast, near Venice, actually. DUP 5-point plan. No. That's the party of no. And people get tired of that. Of course, you'll have the extremists, the bigots who will always support the DUP. Doesn't matter who's in charge. They look past the corruption. They look past the obsolete politics of the DUP because they're happy with that. The same sort of people that vote for this idiot. Okay, what has Nigel Farage actually presented in the last number of years? He complains about people coming across on dinghies. He complains about wokeness. He doesn't care about real issues that face people, real problems facing them. Anyway, let's get rid of these charlatans. Well, we're halfway through the stream, guys, so I want to just take a short break for our comedy moment, and then we'll be back in just a jiffy with some more discussion. Hope you enjoy this.
We got him. Got Starmer cornered like an animal. Yeah, well, I'm going to have to step back and I get a fixed penalty notice. Brilliant work, Central Conservative Office Attack Unit. Oh, and Angela Rayner too. 2 birds with 1 stone. Brilliant work. We got the loss of 500 seats off the headlines. This is beergate bonanza. What the fuck is going on? What the fuck has happened to our country? We've got people riding around on buses to keep warm. We've got people stealing baby food because 1 in 3 kids is on the poverty line. We haven't got enough people working here because we've sent them all away. We hate foreigners. We're going to put them on aeroplanes and send them to some distant country. I mean, we have a food poverty crisis. We have an NHS crisis. We have an energy crisis. And all our leaders are doing is lying and being mean and cruel because they want to protect this ridiculous leader who is totally corrupt and incompetent. I mean, what the fuck? Is this the country we want our kids to grow up in, to see that this is how we live life? Is this it? Is this who we are? We got Starmer though.
Well put. Staying with the Tories and corruption, we have here 2 donors who gave the Tories £1 million, between them handed public health jobs. Yes. So 2 businessmen who donated more than £1 million to the Conservative Party have been, and this is one of the, and as I said before, normally these stories about Partygate and beergate or whatever happen as a distraction from corruption, in order to confuse people about what's really happening. This is last Friday. It says here, two businessmen who together donated more than £1 million to the Conservative Party have been handed prominent public health jobs, igniting a new cronyism row. After the government came under criticism for awarding for its awarding of COVID contracts, including a VIP lane for suppliers, Labour raised fresh questions about recent appointments to NHS England and UK Health Security Agency. One of those who gave was given a senior public health role was the chairman of a firm that is reportedly sued the NHS for hundreds of millions of pounds over failed IT project. There is no suggestion that improper recruitment processes were followed, but the Health Secretary Sajid Javid was urged to ensure that that there be no conflicts of interest. In March, Uluwale Kuled was made a non-executive director and deputy chair of NHS England for 3 years. In just over a decade, Kuled has donated £859,342 to the Conservative Party headquarters. The party's London mayoral candidate in 2021, Sean Bailey, and the party's launch in Hitchin and Harbin, and the party's branch in Hitchin and Harbin Bendon. About a third of the donations, £300,000, has been made since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. The government's public appointment website said the appointments department was Javid's and added Collier has made a donation to the Conservative Party. Collier is a managing partner of Living Bridge, a private equity firm with extensive investments in private healthcare. And there we have it. On its website, the company said it has made private equity investments in the healthcare and education sector in almost every single year for the past 2 decades. Living Bridge portfolio includes multiple NHS suppliers, private dental companies, care providers, and fertility firms. Andrew Gedwin, the shadow health secretary, said the appointment looked like naked Conservative cronyism and urged against the NHS being placed in the hands of the highest bidder, and called on Javid to come clean about the guarantees he secured that his position wouldn't be used to benefit private interests over public health. Another prolific donor, Simon Blagden, was made a member of the UK HSA advisory body in April. Since 2005, Blagden and companies he is associated with donated £376,000 to the Conservatives. These include Pietas Limited, a firm he was director of from 2000 to 2020, and Arver Partnership Limited, which he was director of since 2014. So what's happening here? It's quite simple. These people donate to the Conservative Party, and then they're given a position in the NHS, and then they can make lots of money out of that, because they can decide, okay, I'm in a senior position in the NHS. That means I can decide who wins the contracts. Oh, look, it's a contract. The contract was won by a company that I run. There's an Italian writer who wrote about the mafia in Italy, and he described the Tories as probably one of the most corrupt parties in Europe. So somebody who knows, who's written about the mafia, if he says that the Tories are the most, if one of, if not the most corrupt party in Europe, then I think he's probably onto something there. Just because it's all, in a sense, above board, doesn't mean it's not corruption. This is the problem here. These people donate to the party and then they decide policy. And the policy is not in the best interest of the public, it's in the best interest of these businesses. David McGuinness, great to see you on the stream. Hope you're well. I hate talking about these things because they're make me extremely angry, but I think it's important to talk about them.
Classic.
once again, corruption. This is another case of corruption. This is Fergus Sharkey, former singer and environmental campaigner. It says here, he was interviewed by the BBC. Raw sewage was dumped into English rivers 375,000 times last year, according to BBC News. Campaigner Fergus Sharkey is disgusted and says the water firms have taken billions in dividends and in return have given us rivers of raw sewage. This is what he had to say.
Oh, it's a classic case of the politicians not paying enough attention over the last 30 years. The Environment Agency has proved itself to be utterly incompetent and incapable of dealing with it. And the water companies, in the meantime, have gamed the system to their advantage. By way of illustration, the water companies have abstracted in the region of £72 billion in dividends and interest payments out of those companies, and we have in return been given rivers full of sewage.
It's not directly corruption here, but it is a case of the Tories looking the other way, because probably some of them donate to the party, or it's just a case of, well, we don't care about these rivers and lakes, we're just going to allow them to pump raw sewage into them anyway. Policies for sale, just like they say in the tin. Labour know better. They could not be elected until the oligarchs let them in, and then bumped off John Smith when he was right. The Environment Authority has his hands tied. Authority. It's disgusting and frustrating. Anyway, let's Paul Taylor, thanks so much for the super chat. Max, you're totally wrong. My Tory Red Wall MP totally assures me that the current Tory government is not corrupt. Why would she lie? And this message is brought to you by Serco. Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, well, if a Tory can't lie, Boris Johnson has always told the truth. So, well said, Paul. Yes, thanks for that super chat. Thanks for the support. David Trope. Let me take a note of David Trope. Ask him if you can do a live stream. Yeah, definitely. We have some people also lined up for this Sunday and the next number of Sundays. So let's move on.
This government's failure to...
So the Queen's speech took place today, and there was a bit of a back and forth. It was a bit lackluster. There wasn't really no one really scored any punches here. But it says here, Keir Starmer blames government for stagnation as cost of living crisis bites.
Grow the economy over a decade, combined with its inertia in the face of spiralling bills, means that we are staring down the barrel of something we haven't seen in decades, a stagflation crisis. It is a truly shocking legacy of this government. It should humble those on the benches opposite who've ignored the red lights on our economy, even whilst wages were frozen for over a decade, and whose complacency is best summed up by a Prime Minister whose response to the crisis was to make fun of those that were worrying about inflation. A government of...
Yes, you did, Johnson.
...the moment would use the great powers that it has to tackle this head-on. Bring forward an emergency budget with a windfall tax for oil and gas producers, which would raise billions. The money that could be used to slash the cost of energy bills and help businesses keep their costs down. Even the bosses at BP don't agree when the Prime Minister says it would deter investment. It's a common-sense solution. But instead, the government is bereft of leadership. The Chancellor ruling the windfall tax in, the Business Secretary ruling it out, and a Prime Minister who doesn't know what he thinks. And it's not just about the short-term measures. A government of the moment will take a step back from the crisis and ensure that Britain is never again so vulnerable to a surge in international prices, forced to go cap in hand from dictator to dictator, looking for a quick fix of imported oil. That means standing up to those vested interests who oppose onshore wind, the cheapest and most reliable source of electricity that we have. But this Prime Minister is too weak to stand up to his backbenchers. And it means investing in the insulation we need to use less energy in our homes. That would take £400 off energy bills every year and cut gas imports by 15%.
I really wish there was more people talking about this, that insulation would, and this is something that protects people. As soon as it's put in, it starts having an effect. But you need to invest in that. It takes time, of course, to put it in, to install it in people's homes, but it creates a saving, an immediate saving, and it creates a long-term saving.
But this Prime Minister is far too concerned with vanity projects ever to prioritise investment in insulating homes. So we're left with an energy bill not up to the moment. It's the latest chapter in a pathetic response to the cost of living crisis. Where there should have been support, it's been tax rise after tax rise on working people. The only country in the G7 to do so during a cost of living crisis. The low growth that led to the stagnation we see today is the same reason wages have been frozen for so long. Over 12 years of Tory government, the economy has grown far slower than when Labour was in power, and it's set to go even slower in coming years. The slowest growing economy in the G7 next year. As the Director General of the CBI said, for a country that's used to growth of 2 to 2.5%, the Conservative record is simply not good enough.
That's right. And is it going to have any impact? Of course, very limited, because unless there's an election round the corner, a lot of this rhetoric, which I agree with, is not going to really have an impact. Don't they lock up people who protest for Insulate Britain? Yes, they do. The Insulate Britain people are going to be proven right eventually. And we're going to look back and say, why were they arrested? Why were they beaten on the street? Why did people try and run them over with their cars? Cahill, thanks so much for that super chat. We're beating taxes. Thanks for that super chat. Would you ask Joe Broley, a barrister and All-Ireland winning footballer with Derry, to participate in the Sunday brunch? Yes, I will. I'll take note of that. He has a huge following, so I don't know if he'd be familiar with us, but I'll definitely ask Joe. We have a lot of people. Thanks for that super chat. I'll reach out to him. And also, guys, this is something, anyone, if you think there's somebody you'd like us to have a discussion with on the Sunday brunch, reach out to them, send them a message, tell them about the show, and if they get in contact with me, definitely I'll organize something with them. It's a great way to get people to discuss important issues. There are a lot of experts out there, a lot of people who know much better than I or political these particular issues, and it's important that we get to speak to them. Phil and Davey. Now, this is something that I mentioned a little bit at the beginning of the stream. It says here, Prime Minister hints at cost of living announcement in coming days amid crisis facing British households. Boris Johnson has hinted at an announcement about addressing the cost of living crisis in coming days, but Treasury swiftly denies that there is an emergency budget. So the Prime Minister has come under pressure over a surge in prices facing UK households during the Commons debate on the Queen's speech, which set out the government's legislative agenda. Labour leader Keir Starmer claimed the government was bereft of ideas as the nation heads towards a stagnation crisis, using the term to describe when weak economic growth is combined with high inflation. Mr. Johnson acknowledged that the aftershocks of the pandemic had seen energy and food prices surge across the world, but said the government had the fiscal firepower to help families up and down the country with all the pressures they face now. Well, then why aren't you using that firepower? You haven't provided real support for people. There was the universal credit uplift that you removed. There was a possibility to provide grants to people, but instead Rishi Sunak provided loans to people. Forced them to take out loans. If energy bills are rising by £2,000 for over the year, then providing them with £200 is not going to cut the mustard. He added, it will continue to use all our ingenuity and compassion for as long as it takes, and the Chancellor and I will be saying more about this in the coming days. A Treasury spokesperson said immediately after the Prime Minister's comments that there will be no emergency budget. So once again, Boris Johnson lying in Parliament. So he gets backed into a corner. You're not doing anything to help people, and he's, we're going to have something in a few days' time. And then probably Rishi Sunak looked at him and go, what? Last month, Chancellor Rishi Sunak said he would need to see how far fuel prices go up before coming forward with new measures. So people need to suffer a bit more before he realizes, oh, you're suffering. Okay, now I'll do something. Or maybe not. Or I'll pretend to do something. I'll say that I'm going to do something, and then I won't do anything. Depending on what happens to bills then, of course, we will need to act and provide support for people. We will provide support beforehand. Provide support so people don't actually get into a desperate situation. You're waiting for people to get into an even worse situation, and then you'll say, okay, now we'll do something about it, when it's already too late. You know that prices are going to go up. The Bank of England believes inflation is going to hit 10%. What are you going to do? Wait until it hits 10% and then you're going to say, okay, now we'll do something? When people are relying on, or have already shifted from buying their own food to going to food banks? Depending on what's, and something we covered on the post-stream chat, and it was shocking to me that the air ambulance is run by a charity. You know, if you go hiking in the mountains or in the hills and you fall down and break your leg or whatever, and you need to call an ambulance and you're too far away from a road and they have to send an helicopter, that's not actually the NHS. It's run by a charity. And those charities are struggling at the moment because people don't have money to donate to charity. So the air ambulance, this is insane. Why is that not part of the NHS? Anyway, getting off on a tangent there. But it would be silly to do that now or last month or the month before, when we don't know exactly what the situation will be in the autumn will be. Well, you already know what the situation in autumn will be. Inflation will be much higher. You're meant to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I know that it's going to be higher. You can't say we don't know that it's going to be higher. Later during the address to the Commons, Prime Minister said, however great our compassion and ingenuity, we cannot simply, we already talked about it. He went on to say, we need to grow out of this problem by creating hundreds of thousands of new high-wage, high-skilled jobs across the country. So the lady, for example, who gets on the bus in order to keep warm, Boris Johnson's solution to her is to go out and get a high-paid job. She's 77 years old. She needs to go out and get a high-wage job. And also, there's a shortage of workers. But the shortage of workers is because there's no one around to do these jobs. And many of these jobs are far away from where there are people available to do jobs. We saw it with the ending of freedom of movement. The Prime Minister also spoke of cutting the cost of government as well as the burdens that government places on taxpayers and on citizens, and pledging to fix delays in passports and driving licences being issued. Sir Keir told the Commons, "Times are hard, but when it's much tougher than they should be." He called for measures including an emergency budget, a windfall tax on energy companies, and a better plan to avoid energy crisis in the future, such as standing up to opponents on onshore wind farms. A lot of these proposals to put in onshore wind is in locations where, well, probably Tory donors land, so they don't want to have these wind farms placed near them. Sort of not in my backyard type mentality, and well, they put pressure on their local MP, and it doesn't go through. Sir Keir said Britain needed a government of the moment with the ideas that meant aspirations for the British public. This thin address, bereft of ideas or purpose, without a guiding principle or roadmap for delivery, shows just how far this government is from that. Too out of touch to meet the challenges of the moment, too tired to grasp the opportunities of the future. Their time has passed. He added, the government's failure to grow the economy over a decade, combined with the inertia in the face of the spiralling bills, means that they're facing down the barrel of something that we haven't seen in decades, a stagflation crisis. And he's right. Things are not going to get better anytime soon, and the wrong people are in charge. And of course, there's no mention of the B word. Boris Johnson was saying, it's the rising energy prices, it's something beyond our control, and they won't mention Brexit. Brexit cannot be touched. Why? Because it won Boris Johnson an 80-seat majority. So he can't mention Brexit, because then he would turn around and say, well, I actually lied to people. I told them everything would be better. Things are worse. And it's a consequence of what I lied to you about. The only time when Boris Johnson will criticise Brexit is when he's out of office. That's when Boris Johnson will eventually criticise. Maybe when he has retired from politics, then he'll come back and criticise Brexit. He probably said that he didn't believe in it all along or something like that. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I just want to let me read some more of your comments. Maybe Johnson means laundering money and helping to hide money from taxes. If anyone has a high skill, high paid job, who do they pay low? Who will do the low paid, low skill jobs? But there's no need for any of those. Everyone will be doing a high skilled, high paid job. Yes, it doesn't make any sense. That was why there was a requirement of foreign workers, because many British people didn't want to do the low-skilled, low-paid jobs, or couldn't do them. It's not just a matter of didn't want to, but many people couldn't do them because of the nature of the work, they weren't able to do it. Some of it, for example, picking fruit, you may need to live on the land for months, and some of these farmers would provide temporary accommodation. And for many British people, it's not like if you have children, or if you can't live in that way. You say, look, I can't live that way. It's quite alien to many people as well. Some people have done summer work. You go and stay in a foreign country for washing dishes in Australia or something, backpacking. But you wouldn't see it as a career. And I think that's a big problem as well. It'll be a robot economy. I haven't heard Starmer talk about all the rights being taken away and the erosion of democracy in the UK. This is something that's a very valid point. He doesn't really talk about that. Some of the other members of his cabinet do. I don't know if this is planned or not. Okay, I'll talk about this and you'll talk about that. The Labour Party have talked about a number of to hear that. Sky News is an absolute disgrace. Ian Blackford was on his feet talking about the people of Scotland, and Sky just cut away from that. I think there was somebody when there was a debate today. I didn't see it, but I just saw a clip of it, and Ian Blackford was talking, and I think he gave way to someone, and one of the Tories shouted, "Thank goodness for that." You know, the SNP should take those clips and they should run with them and show them to the people of Scotland and say, this is what Westminster represents. You know, it's not that they just disagree with Ian Blackford. It's that they have no respect for his constituents, because he's there to represent his constituents. In the same way as if a Tory stands up and asks a question, that MP should be requested, that should be respected. They're there to represent their constituents. But when a Scottish MP, generally opposition, but in particular when a Scottish or Welsh MP stands up and asks a question, they're ridiculed in a way that a Labour MP from England wouldn't face. Not the same type of ridicule. However, the Tories used the cost reductions in spending not for reducing debt making, and instead to fund tax cuts for the super rich. Still, while the yearly debt making doubled to 2010. Same as Northern Ireland, yes. I love the fact that Ian speaks from the heart. Blackford is always heckled. And I think, you know, if you're a unionist and you're watching Ian Blackford be heckled, you know, I'd be saying, no, don't do that. We're supposed to convince the people of Scotland that Westminster is something good. You can disagree with his politics, but you shouldn't be heckling him like when he's in the House of Commons speaking, or trying to disrupt him. Or belittle him, or as Boris Johnson does, fat shame him. What sort of message does this send to the people of Scotland? Well, we don't take you seriously. We don't take your politicians seriously. We think they're a joke. And but continue to vote for our brand. And if you don't, well, it doesn't really make any difference, because we're going to run roughshod over Parliament anyway. Anyway, one more article, and then we'll finish for this evening. In a case of "we told you so," it says here, Home Office admits LGBTQI plus refugees could be persecuted if sent to Rwanda. Yes, we knew this was happening, and make sure you get Phil back. Yes, we definitely will have Phil back. You know, we knew this was going to happen. Priti Patel and her party were saying, no, Rwanda is a wonderful place. But now they've admitted that lesbian, gay and bisexual refugees could be persecuted if sent to Rwanda, but still plans to fly them 4,000 miles to Kigali. The Department's Equality Impact Assessment for the policy states that there are concerns over the treatment of some LGBTQI plus people in the East African country, and that investigations point to ill treatment of this group being more than one off. Freddie B, thanks so much for that super chat. Hi Max, I live near the border in the Republic. I'm slightly worried about the trouble from the DUP. 24 years of peace. Upset by dinosaurs. I hope I'm wrong. Freddie, I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I don't want to underestimate the problem, I should say, not sugarcoat. I don't want to underestimate the problem. We Scott Starr, great to see you on the stream. But Freddie, I don't think the UK government are going to undermine this, because if we look back over the last year, they have been doing a lot of saber rattling, but in the end, nothing really came of it. I understand your concern, and I know because I lived for a while in Monaghan, so you probably know where that is, and it's very close to the border. And this was back in 1998 at the time, just as the Good Friday Agreement was being signed, and it was a big issue at the time. But I don't think it's going to be a case of it being undermined. I don't think the British government are going to tear up the withdrawal agreement because it would undermine the Good Friday Agreement, and they're not going to do that. There's no political benefit for Boris Johnson and the Tories by doing that. And I think he would face a backlash within his own party even if he did that. So I'm not saying it's perfect, everything is perfectly fine and there's nothing to worry about, but I think it's been exaggerated. And I hope, I hope I'm right about that. But so far, it has been proven true. Just to get back to this, it says it comes a day after the Home Office said that the first group of people who would be informed this week of the government's intention to relocate them to Rwanda. The first flights were expected to take place in the coming months, it said, adding that lawyers for some of those affected were likely to launch proceedings to stop their removal. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. Hi Max, do you think that the kingmakers in the next who do you think will be the kingmakers in the next general election, the Liberal Democrats or the SNP? I think it could be a case of the SNP, because it's likely that Labour will not get enough seats to form a government, and it's likely that Labour will not get enough even with the Liberal Democrats. So it's likely the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party will form some sort of pact. Will probably go into government together if they form a coalition, and they will still not have enough, so they will require maybe support from the SNP, and the SNP may say, look, yes, we'll provide you support. We're not going to form a formal coalition with you, but we'll provide you with the support you need, but you're not going to stand in the way of a referendum. So I think that could be a possible solution there. And it'd be probably difficult for many people within the Labour Party, and it could tear the party apart, because there are people within the Labour Party who would see it as selling out on the union. I think a majority of people in the Labour Party do not begrudge Scotland having a referendum, but it could create a lot of tension within the party. Because I don't think any government wants to be the one that ended the union. Because that's look, I think the ending of the union began a long time ago, and Brexit was probably the last knife in its back. But it will be seen as, that when the union eventually breaks, which the last government to before a referendum, that would be probably seen as the government that ended the union. But we'll see. Thanks for that super chat. The report released on Monday, the assessment says there are concerns over the treatment of some LGBTQI people, but we will continue to consider the impact of this group and take into account further evidence over the course of the partnership. In a similar way to what the Chancellor was saying about the cost of living crisis. Yeah, well, when we start to see people, killed, executed in the streets, then we'll decide maybe, yes, it's probably a bad idea to send people there. So we're going to wait until the situation is an absolute disaster, and then we'll decide, maybe it's probably, maybe not. In the same way as the cost of living crisis, Rishi Sunak saying, we're not going to provide any support. Maybe when inflation hits 10% and we see people dying in the streets, going hungry, starvation, then perhaps we'll consider taking some sort of action. The report notes that homosexuality was decriminalised in 2010, but warns at this stage investigations point to ill treatment being more than a one-off, but also does not appear to be systemic. The government's assessment of Rwanda's human rights record states that there are not substantial grounds for believing they would be at risk of treatment contrary to Article 3 of the European Convention of Human... But they're not signed up to the European Convention of Human Rights. Look, I asked this question before. Why does the UK government send people to Rwanda and not, for example, to Canada? Couldn't they sign up an agreement to send people to Canada? No, they want to send them to Rwanda. Why? Because it needs to be a deterrent. So this is the sort of weird position Priti Patel and the Home Office have taken. They've said, Rwanda is a wonderful place. There's a wonderful economy there, thriving economy, but we also have to send people there as a deterrent. So which is it? It's a wonderful place or is it a deterrent? Obviously, they wouldn't send people to Canada because that wouldn't be a deterrent. We're going to send you to somewhere that's better than the UK at the moment, because of Brexit. Canada's in a better state than Britain is because of Brexit. So we're not going to send people to Canada because that would be better. Maybe it's a bit cold in Canada. I don't know. Maybe Canada's not the best place, but it's the first place that came to mind. Well, Australia, but then, that has a different history. I don't believe they should be sending anyone anywhere. If people arrive in the UK, they should be processed there. But if you're going to send them to somewhere, why to Rwanda if it's a wonderful place? If there's nothing to worry about, then why are we sending them to Rwanda as a deterrent? If it's a deterrent, then it's not normally a wonderful place. This ridiculous position that they have, and I really wish somebody would call them out more on this. The report, the government's assessment of Rwanda's the European Convention on Human Rights. At the same time, the Foreign Office travel advice for Rwandan states that individuals can experience discrimination and abuse, including from local authorities. There are no specific anti-discrimination laws that protect LGBTQ individuals. Louis Madge, the Central African Director for Human Rights Watch, said the risk of assessment was an unrealistic assessment of a country with a poor human rights record. The Home Office's report reads like some serious wishful thinking, and they seem to change the facts in order to justify the preordinated conclusion. Yes, there's this. It has to be, but once again, it's this idea that it's a deterrent, but it's also a wonderful place. From claiming that refugees are not targeted for exercising their freedom of expression when Congolese refugees rot in jail for protesting their living conditions, to claiming that LGBT people won't risk serious harm in Rwanda, when evidence were collected has LGBTQI people detained, beaten, insulted and harassed for their sexual identity. The report is not grounded in reality. The Rwandan government has an abysmal record when it comes to guaranteeing internationally recognized human refugee status, statutes and protocols. It's difficult to imagine a less genuine assessment of Rwanda's shocking human rights record, he said. In another document released on Monday night, the government said it could send notices of intent to those coming to the UK without authorization that would warn that they would be sent to Rwanda. This would be, of course, breaking international law. But then, breaking international law seems to be part and parcel of Boris Johnson's government. You're going to, before people make an asylum claim, you're going to tell them, well, we're probably going to send you to Rwanda. This has all been sold as, well, we need to do this to stop the people smugglers. Well, the way to stop the people smugglers would be to send a ferry to France and pick up people who want to come to the UK. Can you imagine if you did that? So we're going to send a free ferry to pick up people. Well, they probably know that's difficult because of Brexit, because P&O have laid off a lot of ferries at the moment. But let's say there wasn't this problem. Yeah. Send ferries. That would completely close down the human smuggling, human trafficking overnight. Eliminate it immediately. Because who's going to pay €2,000 to a people smuggler if you can go there for free and safely? You don't have to sit in a dodgy dinghy risking your life. You actually get on a ferry that has a roof on it, that has maybe hot meals on board, a safe place to sit, maybe a bit of seasickness, but that's probably the worst of it. This is all an attempt to keep, as I said on numerous occasions, racists and bigots happy. And the problem with that is racists and bigots will never be happy. It's about keeping them from voting UKIP. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream tonight. With a wonderful number tonight. Thanks so much to everyone who turned up tonight. Remember to smash the like button. But before we go, we have our one for the road. I see you all on Friday, same bat time, same bat channel. And make sure to stay safe. But before we go, we have our one for the road. Hope you enjoy this. Thanks once again to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Thanks to everyone who sent a super chat. Greatly appreciated, as always. And thanks to everyone who posted in the chat.
As the questions about Sir Keir Starmer and so-called beergate rumble on, we speak to our political correspondent Alex Horlicks, who has details of new allegations. That's right, we've seen evidence that the leader of the opposition planned to have a Christmas party back in 2020, but then cancelled it when the restrictions were increased. If they had held the party, they might have broken the law. But they didn't have the party. But they did plan to have it, which might have broken the law at the time. So some people might be saying, well, in a way, isn't that just as bad? No. We've also been told that Sir Keir Starmer once dropped a half-empty can of Coke on the ground before picking it up and putting it in a bin. Before he put it in the bin, he was technically littering, which is a crime. But that's... We also have video evidence of Sir Keir Starmer driving at 70 miles an hour on the motorway, when just 2 roads away, the speed limit was 40 miles an hour. So he was nearly 30 miles an hour over the limit. The limit on a different road. Yes, which had he been on it would probably have meant an automatic ban. And you couldn't see his political career surviving that. A hypothetical ban. Yes, and I've actually just been sent significant new evidence that Sir Keir Starmer made threats to kill. That sounds very serious. Can you explain further? Yes, during the local elections, he arrived at a campaigning event and was heard by several witnesses to say that he could murder a cup of tea. A cup of tea. Imagine if instead of cup of tea, he'd said, old man. That would have been a very serious offence. Couldn't it be argued that by raising all of these examples where Sir Keir Starmer didn't break the law, we're sort of muddying the waters about the fact that the Prime Minister definitely did break the law and has presided over a culture of impunity and rule-breaking at the very highest levels of government? Angela Rayner said on a podcast that she once stubbed her toe. So what? What if it wasn't her toe and in fact she'd stabbed it? Thank you, Alex. Next up, as Vladimir Putin makes a speech about the war in Ukraine on Victory Day in Moscow, we ask, when was the last time you made an epic mistake and then tried to style it out?
Wonderful. Of course, he was referring to, I think it was Dan Hodges. Tory supporter, who posted that, Keir Starmer might get away with not breaking the law. He posted this on Twitter. Yes, we can't let Keir Starmer get away with not breaking the law. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Forget Rwanda, Max. Offshore processing is illegal, period, anyway. Okay. We could send people to the USA, Germany, or Timbrook, FFS, for fuck's sake, and it'd still be illegal. Yes, good point. It's not about sending people. The people have to be processed in the UK, in Great Britain. They have to be processed. When somebody arrives in the country, they make an asylum claim. It has to be respected. They have to be given the possibility to make the claim, and they have to be processed there. They can't be sent somewhere else. It's breaking UN conventions. Thanks so much, Gareth, for that super chat. So, guys, I want to say thanks to everyone for the super chats. Thanks to the moderator for doing a wonderful job. And thanks to everyone who came on tonight. Have a great week. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Good night.